Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Monster Hunter Wilds talk. Today we want to talk about Title Update 2 and as well as other future updates. We know the May update's coming, Title Update 3 is coming, the future of Wilds in general. What can we reasonably predict, but what do we actually know? So let's start with the May update, which we still don't actually have the full details of, but we do have some things to be aware of. But what's coming in that is a big update and change to the 4 apexes and also gore magala as well. They're going to be changed to an 8-star quest where they're going to be more difficult, but the rewards are going to be worth it. So previously, originally tempered arkveld was the only thing we could get the highest level relics from multiple boxes of. So you could get a tempered arkveld and have 10 of the best relics as a reward, potentially. Since then, we now have Zoshia and of course tempered Mizutsune that also have this double box potential, but they're going to be adding that to all of the apexes and gore magala, but with that, they're also increasing their difficulty. So they're getting increased health, they're changing the way the multiplayer scaling is going to work, and all importantly, they're adding more wound resistance to these monsters. It's a big topic of debate that the game is too easy or too hard or whatever, but plenty of people can agree that the wounds do have a huge impact on things, and some weapons can obviously interrupt and fully CC monsters when you pop those wounds with a focus strike. By adding wound resistance, you're essentially countering that and adding a lot more difficulty to these enemies because they're going to be a lot harder to deal with. I definitely think it's a worthy update because, they're just not that hard, the apexes. Gore magala is considered, or was considered, one of the hardest monsters in the game, so seeing him get a buff, it's going to be interesting. More is coming there too, actually. You've got the hammer update, because basically what they talked about was the director's letter. They talked about how some weapons are overperforming and some are underperforming. The first one that was called out was hammer, and it's going to be the first weapon that's going to get upwards changes on average. We don't know what they're going to do to it, but of course we can look back at the beta changes for 4 weapons to the launch version. That is indeed actually switch axe, lance, insect glaive, and sword and shield. Switch axe has a lot more oomph to it, and hyper armor and other protections, a better sword counter with perfect timing. Sword and shield has so much more control from what combo you go to, or just the flowing movement of the weapon. Lance and its output is greatly improved. It got entirely new moves, by the way. An insect glaive, it got the vaulting dance, the aerial bounce back, and actually in general, that is the highest performing weapon consistently in the speedrunning rankings, so I think it did pretty well. We can expect then for hammer, I would say at least 1, maybe 2 new moves entirely, complete rebalancing of different movesets and their motion values, maybe tightening up of the kit for more forgiving offset use, or maybe giving them an entirely new counter or something. I talked to Zach about this, and he thought it'd be fun to give this weapon 2 different offsets to make it the first weapon that has 2 different offset attacks. One that you can, charge up as we have now, but you have to combo into it, and maybe one that you could pull out very quickly with tougher timing or something. We'll see. There are also other weapon teases and changes coming, such as weapons that are overperforming, they want to bring them down a little bit, where they're going to buff other aspects of the weapon while nerfing certain things. This happened to bow from beta to launch, where they made it so tracer arrow wasn't quite nearly as effective, for example. But in exchange, they buffed other things like the normal shots and arc shots and so on. Will we get something like that on top of the hammer update? Probably not, but we might hear more information about that. What weapon deserves a buff outside of hammer? I would say hunting horn, because it's always pretty low in the lists for the speedrunner rankings. They've had a hard time with the Artian system and melodies and controlling that. I think they deserve some sort of update. We're also going to get the first collab update in May, which is exciting. Often some of the coolest stuff that's actually introduced to the game is involved here, and this is their excuse to add in a bit of layered gear. This was one of the few ways you could get proper layered sets in early world, and obviously we already have layered armor in wilds, so what could they do in that way? Well, they could introduce the very first layered weapon that you could use, and I would be well up for that. Anyway, in terms of what collab we're going to get, I like the idea of a new Devil May Cry. Considering, say, they did that recent anime on Netflix, it makes sense. Of course, there's also Dragon's Dogma 2. That was a big release for them not too long ago, and would be their first proper collab event for that. And actually Street Fighter's got a lot going on right now, so I guess that's possible too. As far as we know in regards to the May update, Wednesday the 21st is the currently last known event quest content. Of course, there's going to be more than that, but it suggests that more information will be needed by that point, and so likely we'll hear about the May patch that week, or it'll even release that week, or maybe the Tuesday following. So yeah, late May. But next we have the summer update, of course, title update 2. And with that, the only monster that's truly been revealed, Lagiacrus, which has been a fan favourite for a long time and one of the most requested monsters to come to current gen Monster Hunter. It was my understanding that they even tried very hard with World to get Leviathans to work, and it just was too complicated, too restrictive with the technology at the time. These days, we now have incredible technology and potential, and with that, we have Leviathans with really interesting skeletons, such as, of course, Balahara and the way that it swims through the sand, the way that it wraps around its targets and turf walls, or pillars that you can pull down. The mechanics of that are very interesting. You've got the head and the tail that work almost in unison. They can do some really cool stuff with this, like different parts of the body. So Lagiacrus in this updated version should feel very different to the old version. And obviously, in regards to underwater swimming and underwater combat, I am not expecting anything like that. In fact, the devs have straight up told us that there is no underwater combat in Wilds. In the base version of the game, I wouldn't expect that. Maybe though, considering title update 2 of the past of World and Iceborne, siege mechanics could be involved here to do something interesting, where say Lagiacrus does go underwater and goes out of bounds, does something different outside of normal fighting, and you need to do something to deal with that. That could be possible. And we'll talk about that in a sec. I just want to reference the fact that Lagiacrus will obviously be in the Scarlet Forest, where, you know, you have the apex predator of that region, duna, who's been overshadowed so hard in this game. It's pretty much the lowest level or lowest form of an apex predator. I just don't know how duna is going to compete with Lagiacrus, so we'll see. Anyway, I wanted to make that comparison from Title Update 2 for World and Iceborne. In OG World, Title Update 2 was Kulve Taroth. In Iceborne, Title Update 2, it was Stygian's in Ogre Shore and the Glacial Zone added, but importantly, the Safi Jiva siege fight. So, in Title Update 2 of World, you had a siege fight with Kulve Taroth. In Title Update 2 of Iceborne, siege fight with Safi Jiva. But what is a siege fight? Well, it's unique mechanics that change the approach. You do get to fight the monster in the end, right? But not in normal circumstances. With Kulve Taroth, you're basically chasing it around the cavern, hitting it with cannons, and essentially de-armoring her, demantling her. You get that final area where you do actually fight her properly. All in pretty restrictive kind of timings, where you'd need to progress it, come back, do more, and it'd get easier each time. It was a lobby-wide mechanic, so all of the, say, 16 players around would post the quest and make progress for each other at the same time. Considering the 100-player lobbies we have now, that would be interesting for a siege fight in Wilds. It's also important to note that, say, with Kulve Taroth, it was quite unique for the meta because there was new unique meta weapons that would drop in regards to element and status, and there was a lot of RNG involved in that, could get a really good weapon for that purpose. Meanwhile, with Iceborne and Title Update 2, it was an adult form of Zeno, basically a big red dragon. You had to do a recon fight to learn about the fight, and then the real one was a proper siege fight. The idea was again to defeat the monster before it flees, and to do that in this case, you had to drain energy of Safi. So you go in, deal great damage, force it to the next plateau, and eventually drain it. In the final area, you take on the fight for real, but if it took too long to drain it and get it all the way there, you wouldn't have enough time to actually defeat it. So, repeat hunts to continuously drain energy until the point where it gets to the final area really quick was what you needed to do. So again, shared progress with this energy system with the lobby. Also, Safi Jiva's update, just like Kulve Taroth, did affect the meta in a big way, introducing a host of new RNG related weapons again, which this time you needed to progress the weapon to actually, say, awaken it, added new bonuses, adding length to the progression beyond the initial drop or craft. So it was very impactful. Siege updates generally are. Will Lagiacrus have siege mechanics then? We'll have to see. But it's a big enough monster to maybe say yeah. Anyway, in Title Update 2, we can expect other things. Like I said, weapon changes, upscaling, downscaling. We can expect weapons that are overperforming to take a hit at that point. So I'd be looking at weapons like insect glaive, for example, that are hyper overperforming and have been at the top of the list in the runner rankings for quite some time. Weapons that are overperforming will take a negative hit, but other aspects of it will be buffed. So we'll see what that means for something like insect glaive or other top performers. Like I said, for underperformers, the targets for that would be, say, hunting horn with its underperforming output. I would also put lance in that category, but I'm not sure they're going to get another big update. Personally, I do think dual blades has been struggling, but part of that is just the whole elemental system and the way that the hit zones for element hit zones have been pretty bad for monsters until Zoshia. So I'm kind of hopeful for Lagiacrus to change that. It might be big copium, but I am really hoping for layered weapons in Title Update 2. Obviously, they didn't plan for layered weapons anytime soon, and it wasn't possible to do in Title Update 1. With the big outcry for it though, I do think their plans may have changed and they may bring them forward in some way for Title Update 2. That's my big hope. Otherwise, we have to look at the Artian meta and ask, is that dead yet? Or is the Artian weapon system going to get an update? If we get a siege version of Lagiacrus, and in doing so, a huge roster of RNG weapons that could be really good for, say, element and status again, that could change that aspect of the meta and the way that works. Maybe you'd start to see Artian and this other siege style weapon in unison. Does Title Update 2 need to be more than Lagiacrus only though? Well, obviously we're going to get the arch-tempered version of some sort of monster again. We had the first predator in the form of Ray Dow in Title Update 1. Well then, what's going to be logically next? You've got AT Duna, new Udra and dahaad to come. Josh thinks it's going to be Duna, and I can definitely agree. It fits that summer vibe. You could then have new Udra for autumn, dahaad for winter. It hits very well. But overall, I do think Duna has the least exciting skill options for a gamma set, so maybe they'll do something unexpected here. There's also going to be the summer seasonal event to compare to Spring Blossom, of course. We can expect that roughly 2 to 3 weeks after Title Update 2 drops based on the release of Spring Blossom. Back in World, this was the Summer Twilight Fest, and then say in Iceborne, it was the Sizzling Spice Fest. So again, expect a redone hub, a bunch of new fun event quests with silly vibes and fun things to do, as well as increased rewards, like armor spheres and currency building, that kind of thing. In Iceborne, it was very much a festival, carnival theme. So that's the kind of thing that I would expect for this summer seasonal event. When do we expect Title Update 2 to come? Probably the end of June is what I'm thinking. If we think about Title Update 3, that's when we got to wonder, what do we need in the game? I would assume then that it would release in autumn as that next title update. Roughly a 2-ish month gap from one title update to the next seems to be that positive potential we've got right now. And I would still hope for a mini update between title update 2 and 3, like we're getting with this May update, which again is a collab event, and a rebalance to some of the big bads, and one weapon with a big update, and more reworking of current monsters in the game to be more worth it, interesting, engaging. On that note, I do really want to see Guardians and Frenzied monsters get like a relevance update. We don't hunt them really much at all for meta reasons. They feel underused and I want them to do something interesting with them. I've said this concept before of like the Guardian and Frenzy war, and with the way that they actually added gore to the Wyvria area, that could be something that would be really cool. So if the siege thing doesn't happen in Title Update 2 with Lagiacrus or something else, then that is when I would expect the siege hunt to land. Title Update 3, again, like Cove or Safi as a comparison. We'll also get the autumn seasonal event, of course, so there's going to be plenty to look forward to. But yeah, that's about everything that I can reasonably predict and speculate about with good reason behind it. Lots of questions right now, and hopefully very soon some proper new information. We'll be back to cover all of it then when it happens, but until then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.